Good evening. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. Reza Zarrab concluded his testimony yesterday in the trial of the former Halkbank executive Mehmet Hakan Atilla.
Iranian-Turkish gold trader Reza Zarrab continued this week to give his testimony under cross-examination by defense attorney Kathy Fleming in the trial where Turkish banker Mehmet Hakan Atilla is accused of helping Iran evade US sanctions. One of the most striking points made by Zarrab during his testimony this week was his confession that he had paid bribes to secure his release from jail in Turkey following his arrest in 2013. Moreover, Reza Zarrab was recorded in a 2016 jailhouse phone call saying that one needed to lie in America in order to make it out of prison, according to a summary of the conversation released on Monday. The two-page document summarizing the conversations, which is stamped subject to protective order, was apparently filed publicly by mistake, and it was soon removed from the public docket. On Tuesday, Zarrab said that he paid a $45,000 bribe to a US prison guard to obtain alcohol and use the guard's phone. Zarrab's testimony likely will win him leniency against charges that otherwise could carry a prison term up to 130 years. He testified on Tuesday under cross-examination that he worked with Halkbank from 2012 to 2016 to help Iran spend its oil and gas revenue abroad using fraudulent gold and food transactions. He said Atilla helped structure those transactions. On Wednesday, asked why he had decided to assist the government, Zarrab testified during the trial, cooperation was the fastest way to accept responsibility and to get out of jail at once. Under questioning by Fleming, Zarrab said he attended meetings with Atilla a handful of times during that period. He said he had a close relationship with Süleyman Aslan, who was Halkbank's general manager and Attilla's superior until 2013. Zarrab said he sometimes complained about Atilla to Aslan. Zarrab had testified earlier in the case that he complained to Aslan when Atilla refused to sign off on a transaction related to a fake sale of food to Iran. He also said he paid bribes to Aslan, repeating his testimony in direct examination but never to Atilla. Zarrab also admitted that he understated his revenues on tax returns in Turkey from 2002 to 2016 and procured prostitutes for other people in 2013. Zarrab estimated that he made from $100 million to $150 million between 2010 and 2016 by carrying out various illegal schemes. Additionally, in an unrelated legal action on Wednesday, Zarrab was sued by an inmate who claims Zarrab sexually assaulted him when the man shared a cell in a different jail, the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. The inmate's lawsuit said the abuse, which included rape, occurred between November 2016 and March 2017, when the men were cellmates. One of Zarrab's lawyers said on Thursday, the allegations are outrageous and false from a source that is not remotely credible.
Our first guest via Skype tonight is Aslı Pelit, who's a journalist working for the Voice of America and who's reporting live from the Manhattan court where former Halkbank executive Atilla is currently being tried. Good evening, Ms. Pelit. Welcome to Medyascope TV.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yourself?
I'm okay as well. It's kind of freezing outside today.
You're cold, we suppose.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for being with us in the middle of this very important trial. So, Ms. Pelit, Reza Zarrab has concluded his testimony yesterday. And what can you tell us about what's going on in the courtroom today? Who's testifying and what have they said so far?
Yes, yesterday, after 7 days, Reza Zarrab's questioning was at the witness stand was over, and then the witness following him is an OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control, ex-employee David Cohen. And he's been talking about his experience while working at OFAC and his dealings with Halkbank executives. And approximately from 2010 on, OFAC and David Cohen himself had 6 meetings with Halkbank executives, Hakan Atilla joining some of these meetings. That wasn't exactly clear, but he said most of these meetings were Atilla joined him and Süleyman Aslan as well. Some of these meetings happened in Turkey, in Ankara or Istanbul, as well as in United States, in Washington, D.C., in Treasury Department's headquarters in the city where Treasury Department is. In these meetings, OFAC executives, Cohen, one of them, warned Halkbank in many occasions about their dealings with Iran. That there are sanctions against Iran by United States, and one of them was how the revenue from the oil that is being sold to Turkey could or not be used, and in what context, and in between what time periods. Until 2013, June, oil revenue could be used for gold and precious metal sales, and then after that date, that was with an executive order signed by then President Obama, the gold and precious metal sales were also included into the sanctions. And OFAC executives were always warning Halkbank about this massive volumes of gold trade from Turkey towards Iran. And he's cross-examining by the Hakan Attilla's lawyer, Victor Rocco, is ongoing. We're in a short break. It's about to start again. And today may or not finish with Cohen's witnessing this trial. And after that, we're expecting other OFAC executives and even a police officer who was involved in the 17th of December 2013 arrest of Reza Zarrab in Turkey and the investigation in that time period in Turkey. So Reza Zarrab is out of the witness stand. Mr. Cohen from OFAC, ex-OFAC executive, is still talking to defense lawyer Victor Rocco. And as I said, today is going to be a short day. At 2:30, we will be wrapping up for the week, and we will have other witnesses from both sides taking the stand starting next week.
Ms. Pelit, thank you very much for joining us tonight in the middle of the trial and for your impressions. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Have a nice day.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said the AKP regards the New York case against Atilla as an extension of FETÖ's efforts in the U.S.
As the Atilla trial is unfolding in New York, Turkey is once again facing an intense political debate centered around Reza Zarrab. Zarrab, who is a key witness in the ongoing case in New York, was also the prime suspect in a case in Turkey in December 2013. The case was dismissed in a massive crackdown on the Fethullahist terrorist organization, FETÖ. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan told the journalists that the AKP regards the New York case against Atilla as an extension of FETÖ's efforts in the US. We have trade and energy ties with Iran. We did not breach the sanctions on Iran. Whatever the verdict is, we did the right thing, Erdogan added. Meanwhile, AKP spokesman Mahir Ünal suggested that Zarrab was being kept as a hostage in the US and was being forced to testify against Turkey and the Turkish government. However, as Zarrab testified in court admitting that he took part in breaching the sanctions and bribed former ministers and bureaucrats on December 1st, the Istanbul prosecutor's office ruled for the seizure of the assets of Zarrab on suspicion that Zarrab procured sensitive information with the aim of conducting political and military espionage. In his speech after the seizure ruling of Istanbul prosecutor's office, CHP leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu questions Zarrab's access to such sensitive information. Who provided such sensitive information to Zarrab? All of it was provided by your ministers and by your government. Your government has betrayed the Republic of Turkey. It has given all state secrets to Zarrab in exchange for money, Kılıçdaroğlu said. Kılıçdaroğlu also noted that in April 2013, the National Intelligence Agency, MIT, provided then Prime Minister Erdogan with a note detailing the criminal activities of Zarrab and his alleged relations with AKP officials. The fact that a Turkish case is being conducted in the United States is disturbing my conscience. It is not right that the case is being tried in the US, Kılıçdaroğlu added, proposing a reopening of the case in Turkey.
How's that?
Joining us right now from London, United Kingdom, to talk about the possible financial consequences of Mehmet Hakan Attilla's trial is Timothy Ash, who's a senior emerging markets strategist. Good evening, Mr. Ash. Welcome to Medyascope TV.
Good evening.
Mr. Ash, how do you think it became possible in the very first place for Turkish banks to evade the strict US sanctions on Iran so dramatically?
I didn't hear that very well, but I'm assuming the question is about the trial in the US about Reza Zarrab. And
yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. It's a little bit
okay.
Faint.
So I will repeat my question. My question was, how do you think it became even possible for the Turkish banks involved to evade the very strict US sanctions on Iran?
Okay, well, I mean, I guess what we've all been watching the case, I guess, on Twitter feeds, and I guess the testimony or the guilty verdict, the guilty plea, I guess, by Reza Zarrab suggests that something did happen. I mean, I guess all economists who covered this back in 2010, 11, 12, you may remember that there was very strange appearances on the balance of payments. Huge gold exports from Turkey. $10, $11 billion, which was unusual. And at the time, I think most economists who covered Turkey thought this was a bit unusual. I think those trades were with Dubai and Switzerland at the time, and Turkey doesn't produce much gold. So something strange happened. So I guess the combination of those strange gold trades plus the guilty plea, I guess, by Zarrab suggests that something happened. I mean, so far, we have to wait until the verdict from the US. I mean, innocent until proven guilty. But this has happened before. I mean, if you look back at the cases of French and UK banks being caught in sanctions busting with Iran, so it's not just Turkey. I mean, it happens that the rules, one way or another, are circumvented, and people have been found to break US sanctions on Iran. So, if this happens in Turkey's case and somehow it's proven that it did actually happen, it's not unusual. It's happened before. It's not just Turkey. It's other jurisdictions have also fallen foul of the US-Iran sanctions regime.
So, Mr. Ash, let's actually go into detail about these precedents. Historically, what are some of the examples? What are some of the important cases of money laundering in violation of the US sanctions on Iran? What penalties have been given before, and to whom?
Well, I mean, we saw both French and British banks, as I mentioned, faced heavy sanctions. I mean, we're talking about many billions of dollars in both of the particular cases. I think it was Standard Chartered Bank and BNP. And I think they were quite interesting. I mean, if you take the case of the British bank, I mean, initially they were fined heavily. They had to admit responsibility, which initially they did. And then you may remember that the CEO appeared on various media outlets and kind of said, well, we paid the fine, but really we didn't really think we did much wrong. I mean, I think that was, and what happened in that case was the US authorities came back and said, well, actually, that's not the case. We think you did do something wrong, and I seem to remember they increased the fine. So, I mean, in these cases, I think from the US authorities' perspective, they're not fining banks and institutions for the sake of it. This is not a revenue-raising exercise. I mean, what do they want? They want essentially to ensure that their sanctions regime works. So I think where there have been cases where the sanctions have been circumvented, to use a polite word, I think it's important that the institutions that are found responsible admit failures and agree to change procedures and tighten up on their particular sanctions regime to make sure it doesn't happen again. So, if any wrongdoing is found in this particular case, it'll be very important, I think, from the US authorities' perspectives that the Turkish institutions involved admit that there were failures, admit that it happened and it shouldn't have happened, and identify why it happened, and then take measures to make sure it doesn't happen again. I think that's really, really important. It's probably more important than the fine, the fact that failure is admitted, and the particular institutions detail very clearly what they're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. I mean, if that doesn't happen, then I think the US authorities will continue to increase the pressure on those institutions through probably higher fines until they admit responsibility and they agree to new systems to make sure it doesn't happen again.
And do you think Turkey could perhaps refuse to recognize the penalties that will most probably be given as an outcome of this trial?
I just do not think that's an option. I mean, in the end, everyone complies with the US authorities. If you play in international capital markets, which are dominated by the US dollar, you have to comply. I mean, I think it's particularly the case for Turkey, given that it is so reliant on international financing to cover its current account deficit, and it has a weight of short-term debt falling due. Its annual external financing requirements are around $210 billion. It needs dollar financing, and unless the institutions involved and maybe the Turkish authorities are willing to agree failures and take actions to ensure that doesn't happen again, then I think it's a big problem for the Turkish economy, for Turkish banks, for the balance of payments. I mean, how is Turkey going to cover his external financing needs if he doesn't have access to dollar financing? I mean, the idea that Turkey can rely on Russia or China or the Middle East is just fanciful. It's not reality. So I think in the end, the Turkish authorities will have to admit that there were some failings, and I think whatever fines are detailed will have to be paid.
So you've underlined that refusing to comply with the outcome of the trial and the penalties will most probably will not be an option for Turkey. But let's talk about a possible deal. Do you think Turkey could perhaps seek for a deal if given penalties after this trial?
Look, as I said, I mean, the US authorities, what they want is to make sure their sanctions regime works. I mean, I think 2018, probably for the Trump administration, Iran is going to be center stage. I mean, I think after North Korea, tightening the regime around Iran, and with the collapse probably of the nuclear deal, is going to be really important. So I think they're going to be, really, it's so important for the US authorities that the existing regime around Iran works. So if Turkey is willing to accept responsibility, or Turkey's institutions, and really demonstrate and give really significant confidence to the US authorities that the Iran sanctions regime in Turkey works and is very robust, then the US authorities probably would accept a lower fine. Again, it's not about the fine, it's about making sure the sanctions regime around Iran works. That's critical for the US authorities.
And finally, let's talk about the banks, the Turkish banks and financial institutions that will probably be affected by the results of this trial. So far, we know that the most visible one is Halkbank, but what other banks do you think are under threat so far?
Well, I'm not going to prejudge the result of the trial. I mean, various names were brought up in the Zarrab testimony. We'll have to see. I mean, clearly the US authorities have their own evidence that they've accumulated. They'll look at the testimony by Zarrab and they'll reach their own conclusions. But again, I think going back, this is not about penalising the Turkish banking system. I think in general, certainly investors, and I think the US authorities generally look at the Turkish banking system as very robust, very strong. Certainly for institutional investors and Western banks, the Turkish banking system has been a partner. And I don't think there's any desire to kind of crash the Turkish banking system. This is just about making sure that Turkey making sure Iran sanctions work and Turkey plays its part in that system. So I don't particularly want to go down the route of identifying particular banks. Just read the testimony and reach your own conclusions about who or which institutions you think may well be under pressure from the US authorities.
All right, Mr. Ash, thank you very much for your comments and for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
Turkey has reacted to US President Donald Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. President Erdogan has said the move will throw the region into a circle of fire.
After Donald Trump announced that the US recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's undivided capital and would relocate the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said on Thursday that Trump disregarded UN decisions with his decision. Erdogan said the move amounted to throwing the region into a circle of fire. "Hey Trump, what are you trying to do?" he added, suggesting that political leaders should serve for reconciliation rather than destabilization. The US president has disregarded the 1980 UN decision. Until now, no country in the world other than the US and Israel has taken a step that is contrary to the 1980 UN resolution. Only these two countries have gone against it. It's not possible to understand what Trump wants to achieve. If Trump is saying "I am powerful and right," he is wrong, Erdogan said. Erdogan added that the Organization of Islamic Cooperation would immediately meet in Istanbul to discuss the Jerusalem decision. Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu wrote on Twitter on Thursday that Turkey condemns the irresponsible statement of the US administration. The decision is against international law and relevant UN resolutions. Meanwhile, Turkish presidential spokesperson Ibrahim Kalın said on Wednesday that the US decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital is against international conventions and UN decisions and will amount to a grave mistake. Washington should immediately turn away from this grave mistake that will virtually eliminate the fragile Middle East peace process, Kalın told reporters at a press conference.
President Erdogan traveled to Greece for an official visit yesterday. This was the first visit by a Turkish president to Greece in 65 years.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan traveled to Athens for an official visit on Thursday, which was the first visit by a Turkish president to Greece in 65 years. Speaking in Athens, at a joint news conference with Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, Erdogan suggested that some details of the 1923 Treaty of Lausanne, which established the borders of the Republic of Turkey with its neighbors, were unclear and that the treaty was not being applied fairly. Erdogan said protecting the rights of ethnic Turks within Greece's borders was a priority for Turkey and called for an improvement to the ethnic status of Turks living in the country. "I demanded that improvements should be made regarding the situation of the Muslim minority. It is the Greek government's responsibility to protect the legal rights of the Muslims in Western Thrace," he said. But Tsipras said a revision to the Treaty of Lausanne was out of the question. Ahead of his meeting with Tsipras, Erdogan held a meeting with Greek President Prokopis Pavlopoulos in Athens, during which he said Muslims in the Greek border region of Western Thrace were not able to choose their own chief mufti, while Christian communities in Turkey enjoyed greater freedom when choosing their patriarchs. "How can we say Lausanne is in effect? Lausanne is not in effect. We need to prove Lausanne's applicability by doing this," Erdogan said. Like Tsipras, Pavlopoulos also ruled out any revision of the Treaty of Lausanne. The Treaty of Lausanne defines the territory and the sovereignty of Greece and of the European Union, and this treaty is for us non-negotiable. It has no flaws, it doesn't need to be reviewed or to be updated, Pavlopoulos said during the meeting. Earlier today, Erdogan traveled to Kompotini, a major city in the Western Thrace region, where a sizable population of Greece's Muslim minority lives. Erdogan performed Friday prayers at the city's Kir Mahalle Mosque.
Syrian Kurdish People's Protection Unit's YPG spokesperson Nuri Mahmoud has acknowledged receiving direct support from Moscow.
A Russian military delegation and representatives from the Syrian Kurdish People's Protection Units (YPG) held a meeting on Sunday in the Deir ez-Zor province of Syria. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that the meeting was attended by Russian General Yevgeny Popovsky, one of the commanders of the Hmeimim Air Base, an airbase currently operated by Russia in the Syrian city of Latakia. In a statement released after the meeting on Monday, the Russian Defense Ministry has said that the meeting evaluated the steps to be taken after the Islamic State is ousted from the region. According to a report by the Anha news agency, YPG spokesperson Nuri Mahmud acknowledged receiving direct support from Moscow and said, "The eastern countryside of the city Deir ez-Zor has been fully liberated from ISIL with the international coalition and Russia's support." Russia's defense ministry said on Monday that its planes made hundreds of sorties in support of Kurdish and local militias in eastern Syria, predicting that the whole area will soon be free of jihadist fighters. Russian aviation carried out 672 sorties and bombed over 1,450 targets in the interest of supporting the offensive by the militias of eastern Euphrates tribes and Kurdish militias, the Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement. The YPG forms the bulk of the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces (SDF). The YPG forms the bulk of the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces (SDF), a militant group that ousted ISIL from the swatches of northern and eastern Syria with the help from the US-led coalition.
Our friend Işın Eliçin did an exclusive interview with Sam Heller from the Century Foundation on the future of the Turkish military's presence in Syria.
I think that with Afrin, I think that certainly some of these noises, I think that I would be surprised if Turkey gets Russian approval to attack Afrin. I don't think that Russia would allow that, and I think that in this instance, then it is the Russian decision is what makes the difference. At the same time, I think that this looming Turkish threat, actually, I think that is a useful thing for Russia. I think that it's probably handy for Russia to be able to brandish this Turkish threat. And then to use that as leverage against the YPG elsewhere in the country potentially, because I think that this the relationship between Russia and the YPG, and then whatever kind of ongoing dialogue and negotiations that they're having, this is something that spans the country. It's much bigger than Afrin, and so it reaches as far east as Deir ez-Zor, for example, and I think that it's possible that the Turkish threat to Afrin is part of that it figures into Russia's negotiations, Russia's kind of back and forth with the YPG. At the same time, I don't think that, at least for now, it doesn't seem likely that the United States is going to abruptly abandon the YPG or kind of withdraw from these areas. At least not imminently. It's tough to know what America will do, in part because the American policymaking process is not functioning properly. And so a lot of the messaging that you see out of the Americans, whether it's from the president or from the military or someone else, this is not properly coordinated. And I would recommend against reading it as kind of the product of a single, a coherent decision-making process. But I think at this point, it seems likely that the Americans will stick around, at least in the near term, in the Northeast, in these YPG-held areas, in an attempt to leverage that American presence into a kind of a comprehensive political solution for Syria's war. And that, in the meantime, they will just try to manage and their relationship with Turkey in parallel with that.
Now let's take a look at what's on in Istanbul next week.
Trying hard to see how I could possibly be on your frequency, 'cause I'm missing you and me always.
The Icelandic electronic music group Gus Gus will be on stage in Babylon tomorrow. Started as a left-field music project in the early 90s, Reykjavik-based Guskus have emerged to be at the forefront of the international electronic dance community. Today, the Icelandic group has 9 full-length LPs under its belt, first debuting on legendary indie label 4AD before developing in a more dance-oriented outfit, switching labels a few times before finally signing to Compact with 2009. The exhibition Look at Me, Portraits and Other Fictions from the La Caixa Contemporary Art Collection examines portraiture, one of the oldest artistic genres, through a significant number of works of our times. Paintings, photographs, sculptures, and videos shape a labyrinth of gazes that invite spectators to reflect themselves in the social mirror of portraits. You can see Look at Me at the Pera Museum until the 6th of March.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 9 p.m. Goodbye.